Namaste and greetings. I, Priyanka Negi, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We are gathered today for a panel discussion on carrying capacity of the Himalayas, a people-centric approach. This program is organized by IMPRI, Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development, as part of the State of Environment Planet Talk series. This session will be chaired by Mr. Tikender Singh Pawarji, Senior Fellow IMPRI, former Deputy Mayor Shimla. The panelists for today's session are Architect Romi Khosla ji, Distinguished Architect, Researcher and Writer, Director Romi Khosla Design Studios, Ms. Manshi Asherji, Himdhara, Environment Research and Action Collective, Himachal Pradesh, Mr. Mrinal Gohenji, National Senior Lead and Regional Manager, Action Aid India, Mr. Rajneesh Jainji, CEO and founder at Avni Bioenergy, Pithoragarh, Uttarakhand. I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you to this insightful discourse on a matter of utmost significance, the carrying capacity of the Himalayas, a people-centric approach. By participating in this deliberation, we embark on a journey to foster a deeper understanding of the Himalayas' carrying capacity and how it intertwines with the human activities. We seek to explore innovative solutions, sustainable practices, and effective policies that can ensure the Himalayas continue to thrive as a haven of biodiversity and cultural heritage while improving the lives of those who call this region home. I sincerely appreciate your commitment to this vital dialogue and your willingness to contribute to impactful policy research and action that will shape the future of the Himalayas. Together, we can embark on a path towards a more sustainable and harmonious coexistence between nature and humanity in this magnificent mountain range. With no more anticipation, let's kickstart our program. It's a pleasure to welcome Mr. Tikender Singh Pawarji to offer his opening remarks and set the stage for our discussion.
Thank you, Priyanka, for that lovely introduction, and thank you, IMPRI and Arjun for taking this initiative. And I think this is just a beginning because as the balls start rolling, and as we have seen the past few months particularly, the massive devastation that we have witnessed in Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and very recently in Sikkim, this has triggered lots of issues, and a new debate has also come up, which was not there in the public discourse. And this debate, which actually emanates from the recent petition that has been filed by one of our former IPS officers in the Supreme Court on the carrying capacity. And it's quite intriguing and quite interesting to know that the initial petition was meant to identify the carrying capacity of mountain towns, particularly in Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. But as you know, as the journey started in the Supreme Court then asked the government of India, and we have the Ministry of Environment and Forests that filed an affidavit in the Supreme Court saying that why should we not have a discussion maybe, or why should we not identify the carrying capacity of the entire Indian Himalayan range? That's what I call the IHR. That's 11 states and 2 union territories. And in the same affidavit, we also find that they have recommended some of the institutions more technocentric, like we have the GV Pant Institute from Uttarakhand. Then to support the GV Pant Institute, they've said some remote sensing institutions are based at different parts, then Wadia Institute, some geological survey and all should also be part of a larger team to identify the carrying capacity. Now, we all know that the IPCC report, IPCC 6 report, has been extremely asking at us that, look, the two most vulnerable zones in the entire Indian subcontinent, the first Himalayan region, and another one happens to be the coastal India. The point is not that what would be the carrying capacity. The point is, what is the process of identifying the carrying capacity? And how are we looking at our mountains, at our forests, since we all dwell in those spaces? We've been brought up there, we've lived there all our lives. So how have these mountains evolved, and what is the understanding, what is the perspective of looking at the mountains? And we have this whole history of different migrations that have taken place in the Himalayan region. We do not have time to go into those details. We have the Kols, we have the Nags, then we have the Kassites, the Khashas, who migrated almost 3,000 years ago. I mean, came from Iran and Iraq, of course, and settled in. But the settlements, if one finds in the Himalayan region, the earlier settlements were never on mountain tops. So the British, who actually used the mountains as a utility. So the whole question of utilitarian conceptualization of the Himalayan range actually gets generated in the British era, I mean, what we call the colonial period. That's why you have the Forest Policy, Forest Act. Of course, not to miss that some of the rights were even registered. That's how they were able to bring in the railways to Shimla and, of course, to Jogindernagar. Timber, teak, and tea, of course, was very important in Northeast, and that's how they build these. And then we find the Constituent Assembly coming up, because I had this debate with Ramesh Negiji, and he was pointing out there's not a word of the Himalayas when we were forming our constitution. And of course, some forest is used only for from the agriculture perspective. So this has been kind of quite neglected or relegated. But at the same time, we find that the whole mindset of the colonial masters, I won't say it's a new colonialism, because that would be too extreme to comment on that, Romi Saab. Please correct me if I'm doing that. But actually, even today, Himalayas are being used from a completely utilitarian understanding. Not to miss, of course, we have this Panwar period. I don't have that much time to go into the details of how Himachal was developed, evolved. And when we talk some of our friends, even in Hyderabad today, I was saying that, look, we have seen a period where there has been no electricity cut. I mean, 1980s, we were 100% electrified. So not to miss the point that, this whole conception of binary between either development or that, either nature development. So not that we've seen how things have evolved, but post 90s, and then we've seen this new juggernaut of, productivity, productionism led, steering the whole development model. Himalayan region being identified from the parameters of how much potential you have hydro, generate your own resources, how much potential you have tourism, generate your own resources, widen your roads, and we've seen the kind of havoc that is there. Construct your dams, and we've seen what has happened in Uttara, in Sikkim recently, despite a clear warning. And of course, the IPCC report in the background saying that don't mess with Zohan. I remember that movie, and so don't mess with Himalayas. So I think so. So the point is, why are we saying it's a people-centric approach? The three major areas, of course: mobility, waste, water, and the way we are, consuming our water resources. And we do not even know. I mean, most of these hotels that are coming up, where are they actually getting water from? So it's a big question. It's a big question of rethinking at the structure of governance, not urban, but altogether. Can nuances be, built on what kind of structures? Can we even foresee? Because, the current structure cannot last. The current structure, which is completely dominated by this mindset of utilitarian concept. So how do we survive? And so, or shall we have, a blanket carrying capacity juggernaut coming up like this seen in Joshimath? I'm sure Manshi is going to speak about that. Where they say it's carrying capacity. It's not carrying capacity in Joshimath. It's the bloody tunnel that you dug underneath, which has led to subsidence of a town. I spoke to the elected council chairperson of that region. He said, blindly, I can tell you it's because of that. So it's a very intriguing debate, I must say, very provocative as well. But I think something that we cannot miss off. I mean, this is something that we just have to engage with it. We'll have our own ideas, our own thought-provoking ideas, because after all, nature and people have coexisted, and that's how that should be the silver lining, or maybe the bottom line. How do we proceed further? So over to you, Priyanka. thank you for lovely remarks. And I'm sure this is going to be a very interesting discussion. And then I am sure we'll get time at the end. We'll have some questions once the panelists have finished speaking. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your remarks, providing us your insights into this topic and setting the stage for this discussion. We can now move this discussion forward. I now welcome architect Romi Khosla ji to take the stage. Welcome to this panel, sir. Over to you.
Well, good evening. Greetings to all the participants whom I welcome to share this discussion. But without preliminaries, since there's not much time and so many interesting people to hear, let me get into the substance of the matter. The presentation that I am going to offer is in two parts. In the first half of the presentation, I will discuss our overall national ground reality. In the second half, I will place the problem of the carrying capacity within that national ground reality. And I will be discussing what I mean by national ground reality. When we are asking for a people-centric approach to carrying capacity, we are also asking for a people-centric approach to national and regional governance. You can't have people-centric governance in a small island in the country, right? The whole nature of the country has to change. So let us begin with the first part. The overall national ground reality today is in the tomorrow of India. We have to prepare today for that tomorrow. I shall discuss what sort of preparations for changes should we be making today at the national level as well as the Himalayan level for preparing for tomorrow's survival. This is a question of survival in the coming decades. How can we prepare for change? Change is coming. So very quickly, change is coming. The first preparation for change is at the macro level, where we give a higher priority to economic development than a people-centric approach. While doing so, we will give a lower, so we must change it, we must give a lower priority to economic development and a higher priority to people-centric development. I will go so far as to suggest that the subject of macroeconomics gets gradually forgotten and gets replaced with microeconomics. Now, the second preparation for change is to redefine our ground reality, to have a path we have to follow, and to redefine our goals. The ground reality is the context of our people, of our culture, of our nation. Our path is what will form the ground reality to our goals. How do we get to our goals? Now, what has happened as a result of 75 years of independence? We have got into a situation where there are multiple goals, multiple paths, everybody's defining a ground reality in their own way. Now, this is causing, let us say, a lack of drive towards the people-centric approach. The third preparation for change is to redefine our, what I call, national order. Now, you've heard of the global order, and the global order, as you are well aware, is changing very fast and very significantly. Now, I would like to suggest to you that this is a time for the national order to change. Because this national order, which we call the national order, I call it the subsystems of the way we govern ourselves and the subsystems that distribute our national wealth amongst our citizens. So the critical question is, how do we govern ourselves? How do we distribute our wealth? These are the only two questions that are vital for adopting a people-centric approach. So my presentation to you in the first part is to consider changing the way we govern ourselves and the way we distribute our national wealth amongst our citizens. I'm asking for profound changes, but these are very dangerous times we are going into. You can see the world is on fire around us. We have to survive in the coming decades. We are not going to be left out of the crisis which is engulfing the globe. We have to make sure that whatever we change is part of our historical reality. So our central need is to change. If I was to ask for you to do one change, I would say change the national order. The way we do it is to return to revise our ground reality, right? I think our ground reality in 1947 was something else. It is in 2023, it is something else. Our goal in 1947 was something else. The goals in 2023 are something else. We need to come to grips with that. If I was to summarize what goals we need for tomorrow, I would say three things: a people-centric economy and people-centric governance, a deepened democratic structure, and a new national order to renew the old one, which is 75 years old. So let me just visit history for you. Let's define what I am talking about. What was the ground reality in 1947? 1947, we adopted a people-centric constitution. But our government structures remained colonial. And the elite oriented and continued to follow a model that used central authority to extract wealth and resources and surpluses from our people to finance whatever economic model of capital accumulation and industrialization that we defined in our 5-year plans. That policy was anti-peasant, anti-local governance, and anti-urban, non-urban. It had a centralized, it has, why will I say had? It has a centralized political control and is definitely anti-local governance. It was a model that eventually made the middle class rulers very prosperous. In the last 75 years, the middle class has become an envy of the world, the way it has grown and prospered. We became a strong nation. We got an independent identity and a strong middle class with international reach, but also a vast number of very poor people who were left out of their prosperity. Our people-centric constitution was forgotten in these 75 years. We made a new national identity that adopted Soviet spirit of socialism and the Atlantist spirit of capitalism. Our socialist and capitalist dreams got mixed up, and we forgot our poor people. Our socialist spirit led us to pretend we cared for the poor. Through countless programs, donations that were made, while our capitalist spirit enabled us to educate our middle class so that we could migrate and serve our old colonizers. That was our ground reality in the last 7 decades. What was the path we chose in 1947? Let's look at that. Let us continue to revisit history and begin to describe that path. Both the Soviet and the capitalist paths for getting wealthy as a nation meant that our economic policy makers believed in the well-known Rostow 5 stages of growth. We saw in 1947 that we were on stage 1 of that economic development, which was known as a traditional society. It was accepted that during the 5-year plans, we would move from being a traditional society into a modern society by following the steps which Rostow had indicated in his growth. Our planning commission took the path that accumulated money for India so that we could move to stage 2, which is called the pre-takeoff stage. Pre-takeoff. So takeoff is obviously industrial and modern, right? So we were moving from a traditional society into a pre-takeoff stage. Then after accumulating more money, our policymakers could begin to industrialize. That was the 3rd stage. The country had reached stage 3, which was takeoff. Takeoff means that you are industrialized. After that, we were to industrialize and commercialize our agriculture, to enter stage 4, the drive to maturity. We assume that having reached the stage of maturity, India would then enter stage 5, which is the age of mass consumption. That was our goal in 1947. That was behind the hidden level of the principles that we use for economic development. We built up our economy on socialist and capitalist principles. We nationalized our steel and banks and mines in an effort to reach stage 2 pre-takeoff. The Bhakra Dam, Bhilai, Rourkela, etc. showed us the Soviet-style possibility of rapid industrialization, together with the Green Revolution of 1965 that showed us the potentials for commercializing agriculture. In reality, we could not reach stage 3. We could not take off. Actually, we deindustrialized. We never got industrialized. We never were industrialized. 75 years we've been trying, right? What we did was to lay the foundation stones for private capital to use. The road network, the railway network, all the capacity and the infrastructure was available to the private sector to use and prosper. Then came liberalization after that. The private sector rose to rule our economy. The socio-capitalist path, the socio-capitalist path that we chose in 1947 came to an end when the privatization started. The poor remained poor. The farmers remained poor. The entrepreneurs in the middle class became rich. So that was the path we took. What was our goal in 1947? So we've discussed the ground reality in 1947. We discussed the path in 1947. What was our goal in 1947? And let's revisit history. In 1947, our goal remained incomplete. We could not remove poverty, and we could not secure justice and equality for all. What was promised in the Constitution? So let us not blame the past, all right? I think that India has done fantastically well in the 75 years that we have been growing in. But let's not pretend we are a modern nation. Let's not pretend we were successful in achieving what our constitutional writers had wanted to do. There are still very large gaps, and my contention is that this is the time in which we have to plug those gaps. Now, when I propose that we change our national order, I'm suggesting to you that we can do so by recognizing our new ground reality, the different path we need to follow, and the new goals we need to define. The age of 75 years of independence now has to change us. We want to reach forward and admit our failures. We have to find ways of survival in the coming decade of global warming and social unrest, both of which are written down in stone in our future history. Our first step on the new path is to get a new national order to regain the existing power of our constitution that is vested in the people who took the oath to adopt it. Let me remind you what the preamble to the Constitution says. I know most people know it, but let me just remind you again. We, the people of India, solemnly resolve to constitute India into a sovereign, democratic republic and to secure to all its citizens justice, social and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. Now, I think we'll all agree that much of what is stated in the opening preamble, we have not managed to achieve. And when we talk about a people-centric approach, that is contained in that paragraph, first and foremost. In following our new path, we need to pressurize our representatives to implement our constitution and its amendments, particularly 73rd and 74th Amendment. Now our goals for the coming century, and I repeat this, is a people-centric economy and governance, not an economic-centered government. We are not in some global race to try and beat the GDP figures of other countries. That is what is making our approach non-people-centric. Then we need to deepen our democratic structures. We need to give power to the panchayats for governance. And then we have to redefine our national order. We have to see what our goal and path is. So, but we must move on because there's not that much time. So I come to the second half of my presentation, a people-centric approach to carrying capacity for the Himalayas. Now, I'd like you to think of the Himalayas as a microcosm of our nation. So we cannot carry out a people-centric approach in the Himalayas in isolation. It has to be as a national ramification. Let's look at the ground reality. And I follow the same path, ground reality, the path and the good. The Himalayas cross 5 countries: Nepal, India, China, Pakistan, and Bhutan. They separate the Indo-Gangetic plains from the Tibetan plateau. The Tibetan plateau is the source of some of the most important rivers of Asia. They stretch across 2,400 kilometers, the Himalayas do, and sometimes they are 300 kilometers deep or 150 kilometers deep. So can we have the first slide? Are they in a position to do that?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Priyanka, can you just do it, please? Or Arjun, can you just run the slide? Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure, sir. Give me a second.
Okay, that's one. No. Let me see if I can get the slideshow. One second. Yeah. Okay, here. All right. So, yeah. So now there you are. There, that is the lay of the Himalayas. You can understand that.
No, but I can't see the slide, sir.
Oh, you can't see the slide? I'm sorry.
Priyanka, why cannot I see the slide?
Can I ask the organizers to do that?
Yes.
Sir, I'll share the slide.
Please do that.
All right. I'll put this off.
Yeah, now I can. Yes, now I can. Great. Thanks.
Okay. So here we are. I have just 5 or 6 slides, but I want to draw attention on the vast potential of this land and how much cooperation we need to do. It's a fragile, shared international region. It has 5 countries, common traits, and very different from the rest of the subcontinent, the plains, as they say. Are we seeing the slide? I'm not seeing it, but can you see the slides?
Priyanka, the slides are gone. Yes, now.
Okay, fine. So I think that when we look at India and we look at this special region, what we have to realize is that the entire civilization of North India is strongly influenced and formed by the region of the Himalayas. It is the carrier of many sacred rivers. In India, there are social, spiritual, economic, and geographical aspects of this mountain range for our ancient civilization. So let's have the next slide, in which I think you will see this is the river patterns that all, no, we have to go back. They all emerge on the Tibetan plateau. You can see the glaciers, which are melting now. In fact, the most recent disaster in Sikkim was due to the fact that the lake had excessively filled up from melting glaciers, and its level had exceeded danger levels and led to the bursting of the dam. So we are with the global warming, which is beginning to affect us. But if you see here just the layout of the rivers and the number of countries that the Tibetan plateau feeds with its sources, and the way the 2 rivers have been foundational to Indian culture. We realize how special a place the Himalayas are. Now, let me just go to the next slide, and we can be a little technical in this. Himalayan path to defining our carrying capacity, you see, is divided into 4 aspects. There's the physical carrying capacity, there's the ecological carrying capacity, social carrying capacity, and the economic carrying capacity. And these 4 factors are influenced by the amount of commercial activity you do, the construction activity you do, what kind of services activity you do, and the transport facilities. So from the point of view of trying to evaluate the carrying capacity of a place, a region, a Himachal, or any of the 11 states which are connected to the Himalayas, we have to carry out calculations and scientific inquiries to fill these templates up. Because finally, the carrying capacity is the human carrying capacity. Can the local population develop and improve their lives in such a way that it doesn't become parasitical, that it is the rest of the plains do not use the Himachal and the Himalayas as a kind of parasitic place for recreation, throw the junk and get out of there. This is what is carrying capacity got to get to. Next, please. So, what is our goal? We have to conserve our natural resources, and we have to become self-sufficient in agriculture. We cannot, as a Himalayan territory, we have enough rich soil, enough capacity to produce our own fruit and food and export it. There is no need to be dependent on the mainland for survival. So we have to change the cultivation patterns to make them green, to make them non-polluting. Secondly, we have to look at our historical and cultural heritage areas. We have to be very careful. You know that the river floods, etc., have knocked much of our cultural heritage for a 6, which was very, very important. Then we have to look, we have to look very carefully at tourism and recreation. Look, the Himalayas are not an endless pool where every tourist in the country can go and enjoy themselves and clear out. Every local community at a panchayat level will know. I don't need a scientific inquiry to put the panchayat together and ask them, how many tourists can you sustain in your panchayat? I don't need vast research for this. The panchayat knows how it can sustain tourism, outsiders, etc., how to guard their social sector. So this is not a question of isolating the Himalayan region. It's a question of allowing what it can take without deteriorating and causing harm to the local people. And of course, then there's the capacity for employment, the importance of employment. So much for the theory and carrying capacity. The real action to implement the carrying capacity of our Himalayan region has been handicapped by excessive central control of all aspects of governance with regard to carrying capacity. To implement policies for aligning development in the Himalayas to its carrying capacity, we as inhabitants of the hill region have to precipitate protective initiatives. And these initiatives I'm suggesting to you is 1, convene and form a network of 5 countries to work jointly on the carrying capacity of the Himalayas. This is an initiative the hill states have to take. This will focus attention on the issue and begin the remedial action for the formation of the body for regulating carrying capacity in the entire Himalayan region. This has to be an international effort. Otherwise, we will end up like in Chhattisgarh, etc., where the struggle becomes just against the state, against private industry. This is not the way to go. We have to develop in cooperation with governance, in cooperation with private capital. But we must be clear that we are an international interest in this. So let me show you the next slide, the kind of pattern I mean. All right, so on the left, you see what we are doing, centralized approach. On the right is a mesh. This is a mesh of panchayats, if you like. This is a mesh of the 5 nations, if you like. This is the way we have to communicate and form a net, a mesh to protect the Himalayas in terms of its governance, in terms of the goals, in terms of the path we take, and in terms of redefining our ground reality. So each country has wider and longer term needs for assessing the overall sustainable capacity of the environment. We have to look after biological species, we have to look after food, habitat, etc. And population sustainability is definitely one of them. So my suggestion is that each Himalayan state in each country, and I'm talking about the 5 countries, must form its own Himalayan Sustainable Development Program. This has to be an international program. It is to be shared between the countries, and it is to be centered, in the case of India, at the panchayat level, in each Himalayan district. Each panchayat in each state can form, we can go further into this if you want the operational form. It means each panchayat needs an operational sustainable development goal toolkits. They exist. These toolkits are available, and operations manuals which are available for carrying capacity and self-sustainability plan. Now, the method of approaching carrying capacity is already laid out well. Manuals are available, toolkits are available. We have to adjust it to our own state, to our own panchayat. So the whole idea that you have to completely govern yourself has to be, regardless of whether 73 and 74 amendments are implemented or not. We have to take a decision at the state level how that state is going to control itself. And I'll leave you with a parting slide, which I call a fractal. Now, fractal, for those of you who are familiar, is regarded as a shape that is made of parts similar to the whole in some way. Imagine our environment as that tree. Imagine the Himalayas as that environment, as that tree. Every settlement is a microcosm of the whole. Each of those branches and those flowers at the end of the branches, you could call those panchayats if you like. Now, if we see this, we understand this, then we will be able to define a new national order. It's simply the macrocosm which is made from each microcosm. It is not a macro picture which is decided by central authorities to do what is good for you, to be told what is good for you. No, this has to come from bottom up. What is good for us, we have to work our way up from the microcosm, from the microeconomy, to achieve a movement towards people-centric approach. It is not a thing you can just legislate. It's a people's movement. In conclusion, so let me confess that how difficult some of this may seem, but if you want to save the Himalayas, we need to start at the nuts and bolts level. We don't need big policy. We know every panchayat person in each state knows what they want for their panchayat to prosper. So let us look at the microeconomy. Let's look at the nuts and bolts approach, and let us create a kind of legislative movement amongst the broader states in order to define the problem. As Tikender has said, the word Himalaya does not enter into the constitution. This is our first task. Let's people become aware, because everybody in this country depends on them because of the rivers. So with that, I thank you. I have already exceeded my time. So thank you very much for listening to us. And I'll pass the screen back. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your insights with us. We can move forward in this discussion now. I would like to invite Mr. Rajneesh Jain ji to share his thoughts with us on this topic. Rajneesh, sir, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this event. It's really an honor to be talking about what we really love and admire and is our home now. So I guess I'm aware of the time limits, and I should probably try to mention a few points that that I think is relevant coming from the discussion that has been set rolling by the earlier speakers. There are a couple of points that, well, though people have already spoken about these issues, but I guess primarily this issue of discussion on carrying capacity of the Himalayas is emanating from the fact that there have been devastation in Himachal Pradesh, and is currently Sikkim is going through that, and in past we have Uttarakhand has also had its share of devastation, and I guess if we look at the overall scenario in the Himalayas, it's going to be very, very clear that these extreme climatic events have been happening in the past, are currently we are going through these, and will continue to go through these. The purpose of this discussion, to my mind, is to see how we can actually live with these climatic events without a major devastation happening, and that's what brings us to the issue of the carrying capacity. Earlier speakers have spoken about the roads, the dams, and the exploitation of the mineral resources as well as water resources, hydroelectric dams. Those are all leading to the leading contributors to the extreme climatic events, or making a bigger impact than could have been made on the larger population of the Himalayan region. Now, having said that, it would be really useful to look at our economic model, because people-centric approach actually includes both ecology and economy. And unfortunately, the current paradigm of development in this growth obsessed world, as I like to say always, is that ecology is pitted against economy, and the perception is that one has to grow at the cost of the other. Now, here what we need to really look into is, can we design technology and business models where both ecology and economy work in tandem for the welfare of the people, so that because ultimately people are needing and would need both a robust economy and a vibrant ecological system to be able to survive. And importance of the Himalayas is very, very obvious in the sense, in the fact that they are the major climate regulators of the Indian subcontinent, and some people even go to the extent of saying that even though it's not very clear yet, but they may be playing a major role in regulating the environment of a larger part of the world. So, having said that, what would be really interesting is what Mr. Romi spoke about, was looking at the panchayat level planning, because every panchayat knows their carrying capacity. Absolutely true. The problem here is that the panchayats are now have become completely subservient to the state. Instead of providing plans to the state, they are actually, at least this is what I see at the ground level in Uttarakhand, they are actually almost pawns in the hands of the state authorities to implement whatever is told to them, and nobody is actually bothered about actually developing micro level plans, looking at the carrying capacity of their area. Whether it is building the road. Everyone thinks, oh, well, wow, this all-weather road is coming in. But at the end of the day, we end up seeing it worse than the roads that existed earlier. And the the all-weather roads still remain a pipe dream in spite of having made this huge expenditure. And we can foresee very clearly, those of us who are actually living in the mountains, that these roads are never going to be probably to become all-weather roads. My personal experience living and traveling on these roads is actually we are spending far more time traveling now than when these roads were not all-weather roads. So the reason is very clear. We haven't looked at the fragility of the areas. We haven't looked at what actually should be done. And earlier speakers have spoken about the number of people, connectivity. So for us, it's important to look at, and that is resonating with what others have spoken about previously, is how many people can come in. Whom are we building this infrastructure for? Are we building this infrastructure for the welfare of the people? Then, of course, we'll look into the carrying capacity. Or are we developing this infrastructure for the sake of growth, economic growth? You know, and that would change the entire time. Those are some of the issues that yes. Coming to another point, forest. Now, we see in Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand again, we only see monoculture pine forest, and that is again a product of the overexploitation of resources, of the greed. And one of the speakers earlier mentioned about the railway, but I can't actually help but think aloud that in Uttarakhand, there's a railway station, Kathgodam, and literally translated, Kathgodam means the warehouse of the wood. So how the entire system of exploiting resources and ferrying those resources to other areas, and then probably planting it with pine and the devastation that it is causing all around. So water, another issue that earlier speakers have mentioned, so I don't need to repeat that, but what I would like to emphasize here is that what we should be looking at is, for the sake of, I'm just repeating myself, is developing business models where we can actually enhance both ecology and economy. And in case of water, in case of say forest, I can give some very, very quick examples. So for example, I like to actually cite an example, an incident here, that when we first came to live in the mountains, there's a man who lived next door to us, and he said to me that, Saab, bring piped water to our village. That's really, really important. Basically install a pump on a river and lift the water and then pipe the water to the village. So I told him that, why don't you come and travel with me for a week and show me just one successful piped water scheme, lift water scheme that's actually providing regularly water to the villagers. And I assure you, we'll bring you another one. And he could not give me one example of a successful piped water supply for the village in the nearby area. So do we want to look at solutions which are really local specific, which means rejuvenating our springs, harvesting rainwater? These are some very, very simple solutions that can actually be implemented at the panchayat level, provided the panchayats are actually empowered to do this work. Now, the one point that I want to really make here is that in order to empower the panchayats for governance and not just implementing the plans developed in the district offices or in the state government offices, is they have to have a role in not just spending, but also somewhere in collecting taxes from the taxation structure also has to be looked into, has to be decentralized. The very fact that we don't do that is because our state doesn't trust our panchayats. I mean, that is a very, very clear point that needs to be addressed before we can actually look into the carrying capacity model, as has been very appropriately pointed out, that the carrying capacity model is so important. Some of the other points before I leave, I think I'm aware of the time limit, is just one more thought that I'd like to leave behind is that there should be a reward system whereby people who actually conserve these resources are incentivized to do so. And I think economic incentive is one of the biggest incentives because, not so much in Himachal Pradesh, but Uttarakhand is actually notorious for migration of the youth. So obviously there's no, I mean, the economic model needs to be looked into. Currently, the economic model is basically road construction, mining, and timber, and maybe liquor. That is in some our economic models. But if we can really look at, say, for example, rewarding biodiversity regeneration efforts, which should not be just an exclusive domain of the state, but the panchayat. And carbon sequestration or carbon capture or carbon removal from because there's a lot that is happening in the Himalayas in terms of, say, forest fires every year in the pine-dominated geography, which Himalayas have become now. And so if we can, and their technologies, if we can actually develop business models which take care of our water, take care of our carbon, our biodiversity, and these things can only be implemented at the ground level by smallest ground level organizations, which is either panchayats or maybe even self-help groups. I think I leave with this thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your take with us. We thank you and we hope that we'll have further discussions with you as well. We now, to propel this discussion forward, I would like to invite Mr. Mrinal Guhenji, National Senior Lead and Regional Manager, Northeast ActionAid India. Mrinal, sir, the stage is all yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I was in the middle of an emergency and kind of literally barged into this meeting. And I'm going to ad-lib, please, except for maybe just looking at a few points I scratched across my my notebook. Really, I think most of you have covered most of the things that I had actually intended to speak about. But but at the cost of repeating what you have said, just to kind of order my thoughts, you'll have to suffer me a little bit. But I'll try to confine myself to that 7 to 10 minutes that's allotted. I think most of you here would be fairly familiar with the Northeast and the kind of issues that we have been going through, most particularly in the last couple of months or so. We have had this terrible conflict in Manipur. We talk about ethnic issues, we bring about religion, we bring about politics. But there is also the core issue somewhere that we tend to forget, that it is about resources. It's about land, it's about occupation, it's about mining, it's about water. All those things are deeply connected to the conflict. Unfortunately, that's what's not discussed so often. But that is actually at the core of it. The other one, of course, is Sikkim. We are sitting in the middle of an emergency out there. You know, anyone who has traveled in Sikkim would remember what a beautiful, you know, about 10 years or, you know, 20 years back, what a beautiful river the Teesta was. And here you look at it today, it resembles, I can't find the words for it, you know, it's terrible. It's like a series of ponds, you know, murky ponds that go up to the mountains. And I was there last April. Zongu, along with a few other, you know, friends who are trying to think about what needs to be done for our region. That was perhaps very poignant that we were literally just a few kilometers away from the Chungtang Dam, which the State Street Dam, as they call it, which fell apart recently. And we have been talking about this. You know, activists have been warning people about this. You have the citizens of Teesta, you know, the concerned citizens of Teesta, who have been like, you know,
Have we missed Priyanka?
No, sir. Sir has rejoined. Sir has some connectivity issues.
Acha, theek hai, theek hai. Okay.
I'm afraid, I think I lost you. Can you hear me?
So we can hear you. It's still a little patchy though.
Can you ask Mrinalji to rejoin, maybe?
Yes, sir. He has actually dropped out of this meet. So I guess he will be rejoining now.
Okay, or else we can move on to the.
Just
Yes, yes,
sir.
he's joined. Yes, he's joined. Yeah, great.
Can you hear me this time? I think I've lost you. You've lost me.
What you can do is, Mrinal, if that is the problem, you can put off the video so that we can hear the audio. Maybe if that is consuming.
Yeah, that'd be good. I'll switch the switch the video off. Right? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Well, as I was saying, like, I think this has been going on for a while. In Sikkim, we have an major issue, but the problem was basically also about one of the key points that we need to remember is that very often mountainous states are not sufficiently populated. We don't have the numbers in the parliaments and other places where we can be heard. Yeah, I think that you really shouldn't be excused. Because, if you really looking at the Northeast, for instance, over the years, I think there's been a consistent, a cry literally of wanting to be heard, right? Of communities saying, you need to listen to us about what's happening out here. And this is the way we would like to do things and not the way you're trying to, do things, right? We want to participate in whatever is the nation building process, but not in the way that you are trying to do. What we have been seeing, of course, is like, you can name it. You've already mentioned many of these things, massive deforestation. There are parts of Assam, I've worked in certain parts of Assam where in the 90s, you could go for miles and you could only see the stumps of trees, right? That's the time when we've fostered the plywood industry. That's the time when we fostered, the timber industry, which was going everywhere, the timber going from, the Northeast to every other part of the country and beyond. There's been mining, there's been rampant mining. 2010, that Mela that you had at that point in time, where you had all kinds of characters arriving in the Northeast, from politicians to kutkawalas, kutka manufacturers wanting to make dams out here. The idea was that there could be dams built everywhere, right? And there were governments actually, I won't mention them here since it's a public forum, but there were governments which were going out and hosting many of these people, asking for dams to be built, right? So all this was happening, and this has not really stopped. You've had huge infrastructure being built. Of course, one can understand that there's a lot of geopolitics involved out here, geopolitical concerns out here. We are in a sense very sensitive place, and there will be security interests that roads should be built for certain other kinds of infrastructure that need to be built. But it's also a question about how would they be built? Has the knowledge that is already available, a lot of that is already available, really being touched upon, right? Called upon for the building of infrastructure. Interesting example, last year, we had something very similar to what happened in Sikkim this time in the Himachal district of Assam, right? And there was a wonderful railway built in pre-colonial times, which essentially connected at that point of time East Bengal to Assam, and it runs through these hills. In recent years, the last 10 years or so, the government has attempted, railway authorities have attempted to replace the old
I'm afraid we've lost Sir again, since the network is really patchy and we're not able to connect with him properly. I would like to now invite Ms. Manshi Asherji to the stage so she can share her viewpoints with us. Manshi, ma'am, the stage is all yours.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Should I share the screen or will you do it?
Ma'am, I'll share the presentation if it's fine with you.
Yes. Yes, okay. Yeah, I think, the other speakers have kind of raised some of the points in the larger context. The bigger picture, I think, has come through, and there'll be some repetition, but what I'm going to kind of respond to, coming in with some skepticism about, the recent, judgment of order of the Supreme Court, where which was mentioned by Tikender, where the Supreme Court has ordered for carrying capacity studies of hill stations. And I want to zero in on this concept of carrying capacity, and it's a word that, I mean, it's a phrase that's been kind of used multiple number of times in recent years, and I kind of got curious about it because one was trying to understand its origin and what is the context it's being used in today, because I think it's important to understand the application as well as the the idea behind it. So next slide. I've called it old bottle, no wine, because I feel that after having explored the concept a little bit, in terms of the way it's being implemented today, and also its origin. So yeah, it's a term that is used widely in different contexts, whether you're talking about like Romi ji said, economic or ecological carrying capacity, or in tourism specifically it is being used, and in population biology one hears a lot of it. It is referring to how much of X can Y carry, basically. So there is this tendency to assume that there is a quantifiable number involved in it, or there is some quantifiable value that we are talking about. And so, I was trying to figure out, though I'm not a scientist, but still it's something that I wanted to look into. And what I found is that the term originated in the 1800s, where it was used in the shipping industry or in transportation to kind of figure out the tonnage, which is now known as payload of the ships, and it referred to mechanical or engineered attributes of certain manufactured objects or systems. So it arose in this context of with the advent of steam power, and as a quantitative measure of a human-made object. And next slide. And yeah, I mean, its application, if you look into, though, Malthus, who talked about population growth and the need to, because you can't have finite, you have a finite planet, you can't have infinite population growth. He spoke about the need to, about the resource scarcity, and there seemed to be, and that Malthusian crisis has been critiqued a lot because it was followed by population control measures for the global south, and also mass sterilization programs, forceful sterilization programs, a kind of a top-down, program that was aimed at the so-called developing countries at that time, which were known as the breeding countries, and that is what was seen as bring an environmental crisis or a resource crisis. Of course, this Malthusian crisis was then criticized a lot, and there were various kind of critiques that came across. Of course, some were talking about the fact that systems, the static concept of carrying capacity in a dynamic system where environmental and social systems are interconnected and they're always changing in space and time. So can we, refer to this concept at all? And we've seen that the global rate of population in the last 4 decades has reduced. Of course, the critiques were from the point of view that there would ultimately be technology and birth control and other things that would, control the population. I won't get into that. But one of the biggest critiques of Malthusian theory was that it tried to hide the resource, the distribution of resources, the global distribution of resources, the imbalance in that. Next slide. Yeah, so this resource gap and the imbalance that you see, the inequities that you see globally, this is something that also has had implications, for frameworks that were used to look at the mountain economies and the mountain environment. And one of the significant theories that looked at environmental degradation in the Himalayan region, especially post the 70s, though this is very much rooted in the colonial capitalist imperialist agenda, was a theory of Himalayan degradation, which essentially said that the Himalayan floods, landslides, which can be considered as mountain hazard because of the geological and topographical specificities of this region, they were looked at as caused due to the malpractices of the hill populations. And one of those, an example of that is, sheep rearing or livestock, carrying capacity was a concept that was used, and sheep rearing as an occupation. And I want to talk about this very specifically because when we are talking about mountain livelihoods, agriculture was never the sole livelihood in the mountains. It was always a basket of multiplicity of livelihoods that sustain the population, whether it was transhuman livestock rearing or transhuman trade, or a combination with agriculture and use of other forest produce that sustain the populations here. In Himachal today also, of the total geographical area, only 10% is under agriculture and private holdings. And so you cannot have agriculture as the mainstay of the economy. Sheep rearing was a very important part of it. And it was systematically, this began in the colonial period with the, forest policies of the British rulers, but it continued after, in the post-independence period. And after the 70s, the green felling ban is one example that I would like to give, apart from closure to grazing areas, the pastoral sedentarization program that happened, restriction on the number of sheep or goat and other livestock that could go into pastures, the lack of access to pastures for communities, but also the stoppage of access to forests for fuel wood, for timber. This obviously changed the architectural practices and other practices, and alienated the communities from their own resources. And obviously, then, other livelihoods start becoming important. Urbanization is a phenomena that you see post 1990s. Everyone has already spoken about it. The resource extraction post the liberalization and privatization of and you have at the same time, while on one end you have the green felling ban for the communities, you have the breakdown of access to forests and livelihoods for the communities. On the other hand, you have diversion of forests and closure of forests, or transfer of forests for dams, hydropower projects, etc. This whole kind of whether the Himalaya were always, because we do use the term inherently fragile, but we have seen that this development model is actually fragile, and it has induced fragility into the Himalaya also. And somewhere there was resilience and adaptive capacity within the community in its own livelihood systems, which were very linked with its societal and cultural practices, which broke down, with the changes that happened in the period of modernization. And so here also it's about, resource extraction and, appropriation of resources in the borderlands and the frontiers of, in the Himalayan frontiers. Next slide. And now I want to come back to this idea of, carrying capacity. I mean, if we really look at, what has happened in the last 2 decades, there is with the neoliberal agenda, a whole environment regulation architecture, and plus there were forest conservation laws in place, and the Forest Rights Act, which came in 2006, which recognized that the communities need to be given access to, and their access to forests and forest lands needs to be recognized. There have been various methods through which community participation, whether it was in environmental decision making or in accessing resources or in conservation. If you look at the Indian Forest Policy of 1988, this was spoken about. But very quickly, in the last 15 years, we see that this entire environment regulatory architecture has been broken down and diluted. And so, for instance, if you look at dams, now you had the environment impact assessment notification under the Environment Protection Act, which asks for a holistic assessment of what impact a particular project will have. And that is what that is where even the carrying capacity concept could have come in qualitatively, if not quantitatively, that what is it that are the geological, ecological, socio-economic impacts of a particular development project in a particular area. But if you look at what has happened in many of these, in most of the environment impact assessment studies, is a complete non-implementation, complete violation, where these impacts were not properly assessed, or if they were assessed, like in the case of the Teesta cumulative impact assessment study or the carrying capacity study that was done at the river basin level by CECCSD, they had recognized, they had highlighted the risk of the GLOF in North Sikkim in 2005. But even before this, report was finalized, the Ministry of Environment and the Sikkim government both pushed for the clearance to Teesta 3 project. So ultimately, despite, or even in the case of Himachal, you look at the Satluj and the Beas river basins, carrying capacity studies, so-called carrying capacity studies, were done in both these basins apart from individual EIAs, but hardly any projects have been dropped. In the case of the Satluj and the Beas, in the carrying capacity studies, the landslides and the disaster risk were not even part of the terms of reference issued by the Ministry of Environment and Forests. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not like I mean, if you just replace the term carrying capacity study with an environment impact assessment, it is more or less the same thing, but it has not been implemented. In fact, now the whole law itself and the rules itself are being diluted, not just those rules, but where the public participates, that is being removed from the forest conservation rules. Now the forest conservation amendment has come in 2023, which is further diluting various regulations. For instance, many of the strategic linear projects will now within 100 kilometers of the borders, which is going to really affect the Northeast especially, but all the Himalayan states, they are not going to require a forest clearance from the Ministry of Environment. Or even if you look at, in the case of all the orders that have come in from the Supreme Court or any of the courts, even the NGT itself ordered a tourism carrying capacity study of the IHR back in 2022. The report was made by the GB Pant University. And if you look at the report, the solutions it is laying out is further carrying capacity studies, and it's all about looking at carrying capacity as a management notion. It's not being looked as a scientific concept. As a scientific concept, there's a lot of vagueness and critique, around it. But now it is being used as a management notion, which means that carrying capacity can be increased. So if you have tourists, you have 1,000 tourists coming and you only have 100 rooms, you will have to make sure that you have 1,000 rooms to cater to them. You will have to make sure that you have solid waste management facility to cater to them. So the thing is, the goal is not to cap. The goal is to manage. The goal is to introduce new technologies. And most of these studies are being ordered post facto, which means that we have already overshot the limits in many of these areas. And now the carrying capacity studies are being ordered, which raises a question on the very objective of these studies. What are they meant for? So that is a question that I want to raise, and just want to quote from here, from one of the papers that I referred to, was that unless there is a broad agreement on the conditions of the resources and society in there, that in a particular area, it's a concept or a phrase, carrying capacity is a concept or a phrase that should be avoided as it leads to misunderstandings and frustration. This is with reference to tourism related carrying capacity. Next slide. This is my final slide. So, when we say a people-centered approach to carrying capacity, my question is, what is it that we are looking for a people-centered approach to, for what? And this is somewhere resonating with what Romi ji said, is that our goal or the objective matters. If our objective is environmental justice, which is, with well-being for all, then it will have to include principles of sustainability, equity, autonomy. But these are compromised in a neoliberal extractivist market economy where profit maximization is your goal. And when profit maximization is your goal, the market and state policy are playing a decisive role. So whatever number of studies and committees are set up, whatever decisions are taken by courts, they remain unimplemented. So this is something that we need to recognize. And second, I mean, legally and institutionally, if you don't have robust mechanisms of governance, and that is something, again, what Romi ji spoke about, any number that we arrive at or any idea that we arrive at or a principle or a guideline for carrying capacity that we arrive at or environmental regulation, successful. And this has to be democratic decision making. It has to have transparency and accountability, and community-based and on-ground monitoring and governance is the only way to do this through the Gram Sabhas, through the Panchayat, is something that all the speakers, Rajneesh ji, and others also spoke about. Also, this idea of, like if you look at the tourism carrying capacity study done by the GB Pant University, it's looking at whole, states. tourism capacity of the whole state or a particular destination. But if you look at the Himalaya, I mean, the Himalaya itself are so diverse. Every place has, every slope aspect has a different kind of ecological dynamic. It has a different kind of, community dependence. If there is a, grassland, it's different. If it's a riverside, it's different. If it's a, a bamboo forest, it's different. So how can you arrive at a singular kind of a, narrative for the whole region? It's very it's almost impossible. Diversity and plurality have to be at the center of this, whatever model that we are looking at of sustainability. And there has to be knowledge sharing. I mean, it has to be a space where it cannot just be top down, landscape level algorithms and, satellite researchers that are deciding the techno-managerial solutions. There has to be, community involvement from the bottom, where different voices come through, and every place will have its own, every river valley, every sub-catchment will have its own planning. That is when we'll be able to kind of deal with this current crisis, which is happening at multiple scales. And I cannot again emphasize enough the interconnectedness of the historical, nature society relations that we need to look into. History is very important in every area, every community, and every mountainside has its own history. There are, shared, institutional mechanisms. There are shared resources. So we need to bring those dynamics in so that it doesn't lead to exclusion and the same kind of, policies which are basically not meant for the people, where all the costs are externalized on the people while the profit are made by a few. So yeah, I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing that lovely
Priyanka?
discussion. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I suggest we straight away jump to questions. I mean, if there are questions in the
Yes,
list.
sir. Sure, sir. I just like to thank Manshi ma'am once for really sharing her presentation with us. As sir said, we can go along with the questions. We have our first question from Ajay ji. He has asked that since the crisis is very grave, and as you say, we cannot have a people-centric policy for Himalayas in isolation, what that also mean that we need to decentralize the governance and policy making and strengthen local self-government in letter and spirit. This question is for Romi Khosla ji. So if you would like to take this one. So you're mute. Could you unmute?
We already have a very good constitutional arrangement with the amendments 73rd and 74th, which empower the panchayats and the blocks and the municipalities to make decisions on a very large number of subjects. But what happens is that the state or the center does not release funds. There is basically a mistrust between governance, central governance, and panchayats. Panchayats are seen to be small kind of political mafias operating, etc. Now, it's going to take us some years in order to trust our panchayats, in order to have good people working in them. But in the long run, it is the only solution. Because when you are talking about carrying capacity, each panchayat has a different carrying capacity. It has different geography, different cultural history, and the different communities in it. So we have no choice but to administer this country through micro level governance. It has to come, otherwise we are going to be in a disastrous situation.
Thank you, sir. Ajay ji, I hope your question is answered. I do not know if it's the same Ajay ji, but there is another one here. I think it's up for a discussion. As I understand, the carrying capacities are applied within finite administrative boundary, like state, national, as compared to demand, use, consumption scenarios. Without such finite boundaries, the natural resources are global and cannot help to calculate the carrying capacity numbers. That's all there is. If so, you would like to give some comments on it.
Who should answer that? All right, when we talk about resources being spread out and capacities being spread out, how do you calculate carrying capacity? In fact, if you examine the microgeography and the micro societies of any region in the whole of India, you will find enormous variations in terms of availability of water, quality of air, the type of agriculture, the kind of waste management policies, the kind of livestock that is possible to do, the kind of services that are being, you see, we have not done the studies. We do gross studies. What happens is this country gets ruled by data which is taken as sample data. The NSS, especially National Sample Survey people, pick up samples. They cannot, if I pick up a sample in the Northeast and I take it to Himachal or I take it to Chennai, it's no use to me. I can't generalize on the basis of average samples taken. Therefore, it's a completely different subject, of course, but the whole new technology of blockchains is, in fact, I've written about it elsewhere, is the only way in which we can actually overcome this problem.
Thank you so much, sir. We do not have any more open questions. Moving ahead, I would like to ask now our chair, Mr. Tikender, sir, to give his closing remarks for this session.
Thank you, Priyanka. So we are not engaging into some open discussion right now, isn't it?
So we could,
I mean,
if everybody's okay.
any of the participants, if any of the participants wants to raise an issue, no, we are not allowing that.
So I just wanted to take the closing remarks from you firstly, and then if we could jump into the open discussion.
Great, because of time. Okay, yes. So what I just intend to thank everyone, also our participants and all those who are watching us on Facebook or YouTube. I just wanted to update you because this whole discussion when we were holding, at the same time, day before yesterday, the Shimla mayor took an initiative. And this initiative is quite interesting, I must say. So he, along with some of the village presidents neighboring Shimla, and I am sure this is going to trigger further, not just in Himachal, but also in the Indian Himalayan region. They have filed a petition. I mean, the petition which they released even in the press conference. And the petition where it speaks about various aspects of the carrying capacity, rightly so, as our panelists discussed. But there are two pertinent questions, very concrete, that they have raised. Now, that is what I must share here. The first one is that when a committee is formed at the state or at the national level, I'm sure there will be committees formed at the state level, then there has to be a due representation to the local bodies. That's the village panchayats, the BDCs, and the city councils. I mean, the mayors, or that structure they have mentioned there. I think it's very important because they've also highlighted the whole bunch of technocentric interventions that have happened in the past. Even the guidelines that were there in 2013 and the guidelines that started on the carrying capacity from January 2020. I mean, most of the states do not even know whether there are such guidelines. That's the first thing. The second thing that they have really pointed out, which is important, is that in the committee, there has to be a 30% reservation for the local bodies, and of course, gender specific. I think this is something very interesting, and this is a voice that should like really resonate. This is a voice that should really spread across the Himalayan region, for the simple reason that reclaiming their spaces, if at all, if this juggernaut of carrying capacity, as Manshi and Romi ji pointed out, I mean, how, so that it doesn't become perilous. So I think these two interventions also must be recognized while we are holding this discussion. I once again thank everyone here. And I think, Priyanka, you can take over from here.
Sure, sir. We have one more question. If any of the panelists would like to take this one. For detailed granularity at local/LSG levels, there are multi-factor land suitability analytics LSA using GIS/GEO, BIM, etc. technology. Who should to be LSA? Okay, so Ajay, if you would like to further broaden your question, it would be lovely. Meanwhile, I would like to request all our panelists that since we have had an immersive discussion on this topic, if everybody would like to give their final views on way forward on this topic, how can we move on from now? That would be lovely. We can start with Romi, sir, if you'd like to.
I think at this early stage, as I had indicated, we have to start convening much larger seminars and conventions in order to engage a larger number of institutions in this. So carrying capacity is a very abstract notion. If I took it down to the ground level at the panchayat or municipal level, they wouldn't know. I'm sorry, I seem to have lost. They wouldn't know what I am talking about. So we are talking about making people familiar with completely new concepts, and you can only do that with a large number of meetings. Spend a year or so having extensive meetings across the panchayats to start discussing this subject. All right, I seem to have, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay,
sir.
fine. So I've
Yes,
lost
sir, we can hear you, sir. We can hear you.
Oh, yes,
Yes,
fine.
sir, we can hear you.
This is to be initiated by the state government. And a state government must recognize that it is not well informed, even though it thinks so, of what this carrying capacity subject, how it's being dealt with at the local level. So there's a whole period of teaching, discussion, and reaching preliminary conclusions. It's a movement. It's not a talk down. We cannot tell them, it's not a policy making. This is a movement that we have to awaken through multiple meetings, engagement with the community.
Thank you so much, sir. Ajay ji, if you would like, you can unmute yourself and ask the question if you want. Okay. I do. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Your voice is really, it's very low right now. Could you speak up?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm quite interested in this topic. That's why I just came in. I'm actually talking from London, UK. The reason I'm interested in the topic is probably way back in 1988, 87, 88. I did a land suitability analysis for a metro region as part of my planning studies in CEPT. And we used those days satellite data, aerial data, those kind of things to analyze the land suitability based on more than 40 different factors. We did even correlation analytics across different factors statistically. But what I'm actually interested to say is these are some of the exercises which a local municipality or a local planning department could engage them and to do that. Actually, there are consulting agencies who could do it also on a fee. But this is a practice every city needs to do it, and there comes the participation from the people also. The local community, if they have a parameter which they're concerned about water pollution, or maybe if there is some solid waste management issue at the local level, that parameter could be added into this land suitability analytics. And then you can come to a consensus among all the stakeholders saying that this is how I'm going to develop this area. I am a person who is coming from the largest arch dam in Asia, in Kerala, actually. So I was in the site watching all the construction going on in my childhood. So I have seen, hills, no, not one hills, multiple hills taken down, all the forest gone, and you end up in a lot of landslides and problems in that region. And the same story, you can see it in Himalayas, you can see it in many other regions in Northeast. The reason behind is there is nobody taking responsibility. The state planning agencies, they are working using manual data, which are probably prepared in 1970s or 80s. Many of the computerization of the data is still not happening in many state departments or the local agencies. I would recommend digitizing this data at this point of time is very well possible. There are a lot of AI-based, machine learning-based tools available nowadays. You could do this kind of land suitability analytics much faster than the days which I used to do actually in 80s and 90s. So I just wanted to highlight this point, and it's actually heartening to see that people getting affected in the Himalayan region or even the northeastern region every monsoon season. You need to institutionalize this kind of processes and get it done properly. That's my opinion. I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Ajay-ji, for sharing your opinion with us. Moving along with the way forward, I would request if Rajneesh sir could give us some comments. Rajneesh sir, if you're there. I think we're having some connectivity issues with him. Manshi ma'am, if you'd like to give some comments on the way forward from here on.
Yeah, I think going back to the constitutional framework and looking at decentralizing and democratizing and not just environmental decision making, actually the control of, talking about ownership of resources and governance, kind of ownership of governance processes of institutions. This is very important. And I think that I agree that this is not about top-down policy implementation. It will have to be a movement, and it will have to be a people-led movement. There are legislations like the PISA, the Forest Rights Act, which provide for community forest management, community protection of resources. Land use planning can be done through these institutions at the Gram Sabha level. These land use plans can come together at the district level. There are various possibilities, but there is no doubt in my mind that this will have to be a democratized and decentralized process.
Thank you so much, ma'am. As we have come to the end of this discussion on carrying capacity of the Himalayas, a people-centric approach, I, Priyanka Negi, researcher, IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development. We would like to take a moment to express our gratitude to our chair, Mr. Tikender Singh Panwar ji, and our experts, Architect Romi Khosla ji, Ms. Manshi Asher ji, Mr. Mrinal Goheen ji, and Mr. Rajneesh Jain ji for their invaluable contributions to our recent discussion. Your willingness to share your knowledge and engage in meaningful dialogue greatly enriched the quality of our conversation. The collective wisdom and experience you brought to the table have left a lasting impression on all of us, and your commitment to addressing the topic is commendable. We sincerely appreciate your time, effort, and expertise in making this discussion a success. Your presence added immense value to our endeavor, and we hope to have the privilege of collaborating with you again in the future. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to all the participants who actively engaged in today's deliberation. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join us in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.